Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, then this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. You know, sometimes life can be going along just fine and normal, and then suddenly, it isn't. A storm strikes, an accident happens, a diagnosis is given, and just like that, the expected becomes the unexpected. Though the exact situations may vary, I'm sure we've all been there to some degree. One moment, everything's fine, and the next moment, it isn't. So, on this episode of Equipped in Grace, we're going to hear from Elizabeth and Emerson LePan, a mom and daughter whose worlds were completely and suddenly upended by an unexpected illness. What's more is we're also going to hear about how their faith in God played into these events and how Christian community impacted their story. So, Elizabeth and Emerson, let's start right in from the top. I'm guessing everything was going along just fine, and then at some point, you diverted from just fine and things became more serious. Walk us through what was happening, and when did it become apparent that you weren't going to be having a normal day?
So, I remember waking up in the middle of the night with really bad chest pain. And I knew it was like, I couldn't fall back asleep. It felt like I couldn't breathe. And it felt that there was like something in my chest. So I go downstairs and tell my dad. He's like, oh, just like try to sleep it off. He gave me some medicine, but it really wasn't working. And then I think I fall asleep. And then the next morning I wake up, the pain is still there. So I stayed home from school. And then I remember walking to go get something to eat, and then I passed out.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So not a common cold.
Mm-mm.
Oh dear. So what happens then next? Are you at home at this point?
So she was a little out of it, so she probably doesn't remember what happened a little bit before that. She called me into her room. She actually called me from her cell phone and asked me to go up to her room, and she said, "I'm really, really cold, Mom." And I said, okay. And I felt her head. She had a little bit of a fever. I gave her a Tylenol, and then she went back to sleep. And then later in the middle of the night is when, and I had been asleep, but Dad, he's a night owl, so he was still up. So she let her dad know that she wasn't feeling well. And then, like she said, she kind of fell back asleep. And then he actually helped her to the kitchen because she was a little shaky that morning. Mm-hmm. And he got her into the chair, and she slumped out of the chair and she passed out.
Oh,
she proceeded to pass out 4 more times at home. And so he called me. I was here at work at Grace, and he called me and said, I'm taking her to the ER. So we thought maybe she was dehydrated or something like that. And she had also just started basketball in her PE class. So we thought maybe she just worked out muscles or something that she wasn't used to working out, and that's what the soreness was, because it wasn't like up here in the front, and she wasn't coughing at all.
Okay.
So we really had no idea. So she ended up, we went to Flower Hospital because we live in Sylvania. So I met them there. She proceeded to collapse 2 more times while waiting for triage. And then as soon as they got her into triage, I saw the 2 nurses look at each other, and the one just pointed to the monitor on the screen when they were doing all of her vitals and everything, and they whisked her back into a room.
Oh, so that's probably the giveaway right there, that this is probably not dehydration.
Right. And so they had 2 IVs going. They started one, and then they started another, and then she ended up with 3 total IVs.
Oh my.
Flower Hospital is part of ProMedica, but they don't have a children's unit. So they had to take her over to Toledo Hospital ICU by ambulance. And I rode with her, and we come to discover that she actually had double pneumonia, a pulmonary effusion, and was in septic shock. Not just sepsis, but septic shock. So that is very life-threatening. Her organs were shutting down. I didn't even realize the extent of how severe it was until really 2 days later, when they actually said she was no longer in septic shock. And I knew she was septic, but I didn't I mean, they didn't tell me how bad it was.
Right.
Which was probably a good thing.
Probably smart. Yeah.
Right. Because I
wasn't going to help you.
No, not at all. And, you know, you have to definitely, as a parent, you have to kind of hold it together a little bit, you know, because your panic is obviously going to, you know, rub off on them. So, Dad and I stayed up there, and she ended up being in PICU for 5 days and then stepped down for 2 more days. So, well, 2.5 days. So it's about 8 days in the hospital. And then she was able to come
Wowzers.
back. Yeah.
Wowzers. So, Emerson, what do you remember of that? Because it sounds like there was a lot of ups and downs early on.
Yeah. I don't remember a lot from being at the first hospital, because I feel like I was just like not in it, and I was just kept passing out. But I do remember like kind of waking up and being in the, I think it was like the ambulance. And I was like, what's going on? Like,
Oh my.
I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I kind of like fell back asleep. And then I saw that I was in a different room, and like everyone was like, there was like a whole bunch of doctors. I think there was like 8. And I was just like, what is going on? So I kept just falling asleep. And then when I kind of stayed like awake, I was like, Mom, what is happening? Like, I'm really confused. And she was like, you're going to be in here for a while. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So was at any point, was it scary or just kind of confusing as you're going from one place to the next and waking up in a different spot?
I was just mostly confused because they weren't really telling me anything. They were telling my mom stuff, but I think that was because they didn't want me to be scared.
Right.
So I was just kind of confused, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So the doctors were definitely playing the less is more card.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And they would take me into the hall and kind of update me on numbers and things like that. But some of it, you know, I had to Google.
Yeah.
So some of it I didn't know. And Dr. Google is not necessarily your best friend in situations like that. And so it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. She was hooked up to high nasal flow. So she had very low oxygen, very low blood pressure. And again, her organs were shutting down, her kidneys, liver, everything was starting to shut down. So they did not tell me. So this was Thursday morning. So she had been in PICU for 2 days at this point when they told me that she is no longer it's no longer a life-threatening situation.
Okay.
And I just kind of like, what? And wait, what? And they said, we almost lost her. And
oh my.
And I looked in to see if she could kind of hear us, because the door was cracked, and I pulled the door closed, and I said, could you walk me through all of this?
Yeah.
And that time they had so many pulmonologists and nuclear meds and so many different types of doctors that, you know, really broke it down for me and let me know at that time what was going on.
So how close? Because I heard obviously it got very serious, and it got pretty serious for the church here, because I'm no longer on staff. So I had heard a little bit of what was happening while it was happening. Mm-hmm. At what point did they let you know, like, how close time-wise was it for her to pull through? Because I know you guys got to the hospital, and there's probably a very small window.
Yeah, they said if Ryan had not brought her to the hospital exactly when he did, she would not have made it.
Oh, my.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So thank God that he had, you know, because I'm usually a little more kind of play it cool, like, oh, you're fine. You know, walk it off. But
rub some dirt on it.
Yeah. Put a Band-Aid on it, you know, take a Tylenol, you're going to be fine. But fortunately, he was, you know, he realized that there was an urgency to the situation and brought her in when he did. And thank God.
It's amazing how I've seen that play out in my own life a few times when, like, if a different person had heard about it, the situation may have gone differently, and how God kind of lines those things up sometimes to make sure that we end up in the right place at the right time. So let's start to segue a little bit there. You've been in the hospital for 8 days total. And at what point in there, I just want to clarify, at what point in there did you find out how serious it was?
So she went to the hospital on Tuesday. So Thursday morning when they did rounds.
Okay.
And that's when they told me that, the situation was not life threatening, but she was not out of the woods. And then I had to do a little bit of the double take at that time. Like what? And then they, walked me through the situation and then told me kind of what the plan was, that she would still be in PICU for several more days because some of her numbers were not good yet. And her alarms, oh my goodness, the alarms, with all the machines that she was on for breathing and all that kind of stuff. They, you don't get a lot of rest in a hospital anyway, but her alarms were going off all night long, and the breathing machines and stuff that she was on. For some reason, one of them just stopped working, and then they had to, do alerts and things like that to bring people in the middle of the night to get that. So it was like, just when we started to feel like things were starting to improve, then we couldn't get our oxygen regulated. And so that, that put her back into a much more severe situation again. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
So then this is scary for anybody, for any child, any parent. Uncertainty, confusion, lots of serious stuff happening. But for those like you guys have a faith, at what point does that start to enter into your mind? I'm imagining early on, it's probably just, you're just going from moment to moment. So at what point does your faith start to play in? And was that a challenge? How does faith work its way into this for you guys?
Faith came into action when people came and visit me. Like my best friend, she came and visited me, I think a couple times. And that made me feel a lot better because I'm really close with her and it really helped me get through the situation. And like people at Grace and my family members, that really helped.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Right.
What about you, Elizabeth?
For me, I pray a lot anyway. I try to converse with God throughout the day, but I really had a hard time holding it together just when those two nurses in the triage looked at each other and tapped at the screen and then like ran her back to the room, and they immediately started her on 3 different antibiotics and had the 2 IVs going. And I mean, and even then, although I didn't recognize the seriousness of the situation, I was just praying and like nonstop prayers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, like, I'm always curious when you look back, how did you see the prayers answered? Do you see God's hand on it in ways now that you maybe didn't in the moment?
I think I saw it kind of like when I was getting better, and like for the first couple of days, it was really hard for me to walk. So like they had to put like stuff near me so I couldn't get up. But then when I started like getting strength back, I feel like that's when I really felt God and with me.
Yeah. I think when she saw, Pastor Todd came up first to visit, and he came up and just did a little bit of a pop in the room and just said, "Hey, we're praying for you." So that, I think when you're going through something, a lot of times you feel very alone.
Sure.
And even we have 2 other children, my husband and I, so she's got 2 brothers at home. So, he couldn't be up there the entire time. So he was kind of going back and forth, being a parent to our other children. So there were a lot of times, and when she was asleep, I felt really, really alone. But then, a lot of people, a lot of text messages, and I didn't even tell some of my closest friends until till we knew she was kind of out of the woods. But like the prayers, Dan and everybody here just checking in on me. And then when they put her on their prayer chain and sent out those prayer requests, and then I started getting some more text messages from other people and some phone calls, and just like, "Hey, you don't have to text back, but we just want you to know we're praying." And I really started to feel like I'm not walking alone in this, like the whole footsteps, footprints, that prayer, when you feel so alone when you're going through something. And then, those texts were like, okay, God is working through other people to remind me that he's not abandoned us and that she's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's as scary as it was, I really did feel him carrying us. So I felt like, this is awful. I never want to do this again, but I know that we're going to get through this, and I know that she's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's such a fighter. So yeah.
That's really amazing. And I think encouraging, at least for me, because I've not been in your guys' shoes, but I've been the one who's, and maybe for some of our listeners, that's true as well, been the one who's just like, hears about the prayer request and you're okay, what do I do with this? And just to hear how encouraging it was for you guys to hear that support come in. I love the, hey, you don't have to text back.
Right.
Because that always intimidates me, because I'm like, oh, they're going through a lot. I don't want to bother them with anything. And then, I got a busy day. So like, oh, if they text back, like I probably won't be able to get to it. Like, just let people know you're praying, you're thinking about them, and that they're not alone.
Right.
That is probably, I imagine, the biggest thing.
Right. And Dan and Aaron Gildner came up. So that was really incredible too. And they brought us like a gift card because, we were pretty much eating Panera nonstop, so a lot of Panera. But that was just great because we just felt so held and so carried. And we knew that God was really working through his angels that he sent to us to let us know that he's got us and we weren't alone and we were going to be okay.
Because that's got to be probably the hardest part is as a mom, and even as the patient in that scenario, you're just along for the ride.
Yeah.
There's really nothing you can do. It's nothing is in your control, which only probably adds to the feeling of isolation. So to have your brothers and sisters in Christ reach out and visit and send care and kind of hold you up in that.
Right.
So at least if you feel like things are out of control, at least you feel held.
Right.
Which, I mean, gosh, there's just like, we're never too old for that.
No.
I think of my 1-year-old and we were doing some gardening work and he was on the other side of the door and I was outside and just like, he was not okay with that.
Right.
So just to be held in that moment was good for him, but we're never too old for that when we're going through something that's bigger than us and out of our control. Well, that's really amazing. I really thank you guys and appreciate your time and sharing that story. So how long ago was this at this point?
I think it was in January.
It was in January.
In the middle of January.
Yep.
Yeah.
That flew by.
Yep. It did. And so, but she's had to see the pulmonologist several times since and cardiologist, and just to make sure that she's okay. They also said that she really can't get any type of pulmonary infections. Like she has to be really guarded with that just because her lungs were so bad that they said a good 6 months before her lungs would actually be healed. So so we're not even quite there yet. And she's so active. And the other thing is she had always been so healthy. So this was such a fluke. And even the pulmonologist said, this was a fluke. This was weird because she is so just naturally healthy person. The rest of us could get sick and, she gets a sneeze, and that's it. And the whole time too, she didn't cough at all. They would put her on machines to force her to cough, but she wasn't coughing. So like it presenting as double pneumonia and as severe as it was. And that was what that pain was in her chest. And it was really in her back. So we thought maybe even kidneys or whatever, kidney failure, but that, just wasn't what we would have imagined. So it was shocking. But just a huge relief that she's doing okay and that, God saw us through all of it.
And prayer's still welcome.
Yeah, very much. Always welcome.
Yes. It's just always so challenging. And I would be curious to hear, like, when we go through things, we can see God's hand looking back, even just a few months afterwards, but then even years later, we'll see those things come up in the way that then I'm sure you guys will eventually be in a situation where you'll be comforting someone going through a similar situation when they're feeling out of control.
Right.
And, we don't appreciate that until those moments happen. But in the meantime, what an amazing story. And just an amazing encouragement for us all to not leave each other hanging when we're going through something hard, because it makes all the difference. It sounds like. Yeah.
You have no idea how just a text message or a phone call or something, how much that means to someone who's going through something. And it's just, how we can be the hands and feet of Christ because, he works through us in so many ways that, if you get that, that little urge or whatever, sometimes people call it like a tap on the shoulder, like the Holy Spirit encouraging you to say something to someone, like even like you look pretty today or something like that, kind word or gesture can mean so much to people. And we really try to do that. We actually saw a gal at Kroger yesterday who she just looked really pretty and had a really pretty dress on. Emerson's like, oh, she's got such a pretty dress. And I'm like, we need to tell her that. Yeah. Because people are so quick to criticize. So that the kind words and that kindness and any gesture that you can do is working for God. So
I completely agree, because I was just going to add that like you don't have to wait for someone to come through the prayer chain to send an encouraging text. Right. I called a friend today and had no idea they were going through something really difficult. And I've heard stories of that before where people just felt the Holy Spirit nudging, even at random times. The situation I'm thinking of, it was like 3 a.m. for my friend, and they felt an urge to call another friend of theirs to just let them know that God cares about them. And come to find out later, that person didn't respond in that night. It was months later that they told her that they were considering suicide, I think. Okay. And had it not been for that text, who knows how the night would have gone for them. Right. Yeah. So, and it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't have to be something that serious, a life-threatening disease or a life-threatening depression. Sometimes people do. They just need the little breadcrumbs that God is, using us to cast for people to know that they're still seen and they're still loved.
Yep, definitely.
Well, as we wrap up today's episode, I first want to thank Elizabeth and Emerson for being on our show and taking the time to share their gripping story of life and near death. What an amazing testimony of God being at work in our lives through circumstances and through the prayers and encouragements of others. Along those lines, I would like to encourage all of us to never be afraid of being an encouragement to others. We don't always know what people around us are walking through, and we may never realize what an encouraging word may do for them. However, as Elizabeth and Emerson proved for us today, that encouragement could mean a great deal to someone as they endure the trial that they're walking through. As Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians 5:11, continue encouraging each other and building each other up, just as you are already doing. In case you didn't catch that at the end, Paul assumes that we're already doing this, like it's just part of our normal Christian walk. So, if there's someone who comes to mind right now or at any point this week, send a text, give a call, and encourage one another. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but as always, we thank you for being a part of this episode and hope it has been a blessing to you and your walk with Jesus. New episodes of Equipped in Grace are posted every Wednesday at 8 a.m., so be sure to subscribe or follow this show on the podcast app of your choice to be notified of our latest content. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.